Hi, JB. How are you?
Good, thank you. And you?
Doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
And thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you because I love time travel. I love the concept of it. I've always loved it since I was a little kid. I'm sure you are the same way, yeah?
Absolutely. It's, of course, a subject that fascinates a lot of people, but yes, it's something that's always intrigued me. The ability to go meet people, change things, perhaps make an impact is something I think appeals to everyone.
I agree with that. So, you've got how many books have you written on this subject?
The series is called Time Benders, and there are two out so far. The first one, Time Benders in the Machine, and the second, Time Benders and the Two Promises. So those are out already available, and I am working on a third in the series right now.
Okay, super. Before we get to your books, I do want to talk about the books, but I want to just talk a little casually about time travel, if you don't mind.
Sure.
If you could pick any time in history that you could go to, where would it be?
Well, I've always had a fascination for the early American history, so that would probably be my first stop. But, after a lifetime of reading and learning, it would probably also include several points in history to meet several very important people. So, for me, it would be about meeting and interacting with people who had had an impact more than anything else.
Okay. Now, there is that idea that you cannot go back and change history. I mean, there's always been that thing about people saying, oh, if we could only go back, and kill Adolf Hitler, we wouldn't have had the war and it wouldn't have been all of that mess in Europe. But then there is
Yes,
that
those.
theory that if you go back and change history, that you could screw up something else that you don't even know about, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the intriguing aspects of time travel is if you could do it, what would be the impact? And the academic world has even come up with what they describe as some key paradoxes of what would happen if you could do that. And that kill Hitler is actually one of their paradoxes, that what would happen if you could go back and stop what you think is the most horrendous thing that occurred in human history. Would that make everything wonderful, or would it create a vacuum where something potentially more evil might occur? And so that's something I think if we actually do get the ability to time travel realistically, we'll really have to think through because you don't know what you could change, and it could be something even really minute, like a conversation you had with someone that shifts their ideas about something and maybe takes them off their course and changes the world that way. So it's hard to understand what might happen. And in the books, I really try and approach that through plot of the what the characters go through when they do time travel, so that people can see there is an implication for that.
The one that always scares me is if you get a little too close to home. And if you were to time travel back, like for example, if I was to time travel back and see my parents when they were young and something happened and they never met,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden I'm not born, right?
Yes, that whole 80s cult movie. And so, yes, I mean that's also some of those paradoxes, and some of that information is really, you know, is really, you really start to head down a rabbit hole when you think about, well, you can't go here and you can't talk to this person and you can't meet that person. You might change things and you might not be born. And yeah, it's an interesting concept to sort of mull over, and you end up kind of off on tangents all over the place.
Yeah, it's very true. I was looking at your talking points on the bio that was uh, Heather sent.
Yes.
And most of them were seemed to be relevant to time travel in one way or another. But there was one on here, how orphans deal with the loss of their parents. What does that have to do with time travel, or does it?
Well, it really is just the backdrop for the time traveling in the Time Benders books, is
Oh,
that
okay.
the children and the main characters are, preteen to teenage, and they've lost their parents and get placed in a boarding school. And one of their first struggles is, now that they know how to time travel, can they stop their parents' death? And can they change their lives by doing that? And so it really is, the whole idea of them being orphans is really a backdrop for their time travel. But it also is another underlying theme of the book about loss, dealing with loss, and how, the ability to time travel might impact that, as well as, their Christian upbringing and spirituality, and the question about, why is this happening? So, the orphan part of the story is really just a backdrop for the empowerment of the young people and their time traveling adventures.
Okay. So, do you want to tell us how they are able to time travel?
They go to a boarding school, and they are mulling through a building that's no longer in use on campus, and they find all kinds of records and information. And one of the main characters, his name is Joe. He is the most traumatized by his parents' loss, and he goes back into that building and finds all kinds of notebooks about math problems, which is his biggest area of interest and expertise. And he goes off and solves an unfinished math problem that is basically the theory of bending time and traveling through time. And they collectively then build a machine and use it to time travel. So that's how they come upon it. And the character Joe's idea is really, let's go back and change something about our parents' lives so they aren't in that horrible accident and we have them back. And that's his main driver.
What's their time machine look like? Is it a DeLorean?
No, um, it's more like an old, photo mat that you go into to take pictures. It's a little bit
Oh,
bigger than
okay.
that, and metal, and it's got kind of a submarine door. I mean, the books are set in the 70s, so there's an aspect of it that is, let's use the materials we can find around, as opposed to ordering things up from Amazon. So, um, so they kind of made do with some of the things they found, to create this machine.
Okay. Well, that reminds me of Bill and Ted's,
Yeah,
right? Because they
exactly.
used the phone
It's a little
booth,
bigger
yeah?
than a phone booth, but not a DeLorean.
But
And
not a
so,
DeLorean. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, time travel has been, and then there's been like serious ones. There was a show back in the 60s. I don't know if you're old enough to remember it, but uh, called, what was it called? Was it called Time Machine?
I believe so. Yes, I'm not quite old enough, but I do know what you're talking about.
It had
I
that
was a
sort of
pretty young child in the 60s.
spirally kind of. Oh, I don't think that's the right title for it. It's Time something, but and it was two guys that originally I think the show the pilot they were on the Titanic and
Oh,
then
yeah.
they get whipped off the Titanic and Lee Merriweather was one of the stars of that show.
Mm.
I just don't remember the rest of it, but yeah, it was in the 60s, but it was very serious. You know, it wasn't like Bill and Ted's or Back to the
Right.
Future where it had a comedy element to it. Um, But yeah, time travel has been something that has been talked about in the science communities. And so, is it possible? I mean, Einstein said no, right?
Einstein said he doubted it was possible, because of the energy that would have to be generated in order to make it happen. Recent scientific and academic arenas have shown that, in theory, it absolutely is possible. But again, it comes down to the energy required to concentrate to move faster than the speed of light. And something to put a human in that would sustain that kind of force and hold them and keep them safe through that activity. So in terms of could you just go out and build one yourself and make that happen? I don't think that's possible at this point, but from a purely scientific and mathematical perspective, they have proven, in the last probably 5 or so years, that it should be possible. We just have some things to work out and some other things to advance, such as that energy and something to put ourselves in to sustain us through that adventure.
So the first challenge is that we have to travel faster than the speed of light. Is that correct?
Yes, you have to be able to travel faster than the way time moves, so that you can either jump forward or basically, create a bend in time, like you picked up a piece of paper and kind of rolled it up, so that when one edge of the paper touched the other edge, you could kind of let go of the energy and you would be deposited in that other time.
Oh, that's an interesting analogy. I like that.
Yeah. So, you have to be able to move pretty fast in order to create that energy in the universe, so that you could do that. But, that's the theory.
It's interesting that Star Trek and Star Wars never touched on time travel because they are traveling at faster than the speed of light, according to the show, right?
Yes, and I always wondered about that particularly in Star Trek, with as many different sort of offshoots of that original story. Why were they not traveling through time and potentially changing the things that were, wrong about their society and their culture at that point? And yeah, I always wondered why they didn't go there. They can beam up from places and take a human being and disperse them into particles and recollect them into a human being somewhere else. They probably should have been able to figure out time travel.
Yeah, you would think so. Although they did do a couple of shows where they went to a particular planet that had the exact same thing going on. Like there was the one Nazi Germany planet that was
Yes,
exactly like Earth in 1940, but it wasn't time travel. It was a
right,
parallel planet, right?
right. Yeah, it was more along a parallel universe sort of
Parallel
idea
universe. Yeah,
than traveling.
right, exactly. Um, so, how long have your books been out now?
The first book was released in 2018, and the second book was released in February of this year.
Okay, how are they doing?
Oh, they're doing pretty well in terms of the adult crowd, which was a little surprising to me, because they are targeted to young adults and middle grade. Um, and, obviously the things we've got going on now with everybody on lockdown and, has prevented me from being able to do a usual round of work with libraries and places where the young people tend to congregate and read. So, struggling a little bit this year, but I think that's sort of par for the course for everybody.
Yeah, I think so. So, no book tours, yeah? You're not doing
No,
that.
it came out right before the lockdown started, so everything I've been doing has been more virtual because, libraries closed and schools closed and bookstores closed, so it was a
Yeah.
little bit difficult to have launch parties and readings and things like that.
Well, I hope we get life back to normal at some point.
As do I, and particularly for the kids, I really hope that that's the case.
My guest is JB Yanni. Your book is called Time Benders, and it's two parts right now.
It is right now. There will be a third coming out probably sometime early next year. And I've already sort of thought through a fourth, so I suspect there will be four. I don't know if there'll be more than that.
Great. Do you have a website you want to give out?
I do. It is jbyanni.com, and that's jbyanni.com. It has all kinds of information about my favorite time travel literature, those paradoxes we talked about, and information about the books and where you can buy them.
Super. Thanks so much for coming on the show. This was a lot of